Welcome to On the Spot Review. I'm going to talk about John Wick 3. I was somewhat waiting for this movie. I didn't really watch any trailers for it. I only saw the posters of it. But I was interested all the same because of really where John Wick 2 ends. Where John Wick becomes excommunicado and he has to kind of run for his life from all these killers that are out to get him now. But part of me was also nervous in the third movie that they were going to abandon that plot or just have some development where it's like, well, now the High Table has to put aside their excommunicado with John Wick to team up with him to take out a bigger threat. Something like that. Some movies tend to do that a lot with these these little plot lines, but John Wick 3 does not turn away from it. It actually continues it and furthers it even more, which I really enjoyed about John Wick 3. Out of the three movies, I think it's the second best John Wick movie. The first one is the best one because it's more tight and I think it had a good balance of a simple story that justifies the action and it's nothing that's too convoluted or it's a try-hard movie, like it's trying to be very emotional and manipulative in an emotional way. It feels like everything is earned and simple. It's not something that's over the top or grandiose. Two, it kind of goes a little bit into the grandiose nature of things with continuing building up the Continental and the High Table and their roles in the world. But it was still somewhat interesting. I just think two fell by the wayside a little bit. It just didn't have that much of an impactful story than what I remember. I watched it last night and it still feels better than what my memory of it was, but it still just didn't have that same impact the first one did. The third one really does continue the momentum and it actually has a nice balance of story and action scenes where they both kind of go hand in hand. The action, as always, is top-notch with John Wick movies, even though I think this is better than the second movie with how it's paced. It starts off slow, it starts off with a one-on-one, and then it kind of adds from there. It's like a snowball that's picking up momentum as the movie goes on. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That makes the movie much more engaging to watch. The pacing is really good for the most part. I think the only time the pacing kind of slows down is the middle part where you kind of go to a desert setting. That to me is where the movie starts to slow down a bit. That it just doesn't feel as fast as you'd like. John Wick 1 I think still has the best pacing of these movies. It really got things moving along and it didn't really drag. Everything felt like it was moving at a good pace. 2 was just hit or miss with the pacing, and 3, it does better with it, but it still has periods of dragging, and it just kind of feels like, you know, we really want to move on to the next plot line, and we're stuck in this desert area. So now I'm going to kind of get into spoilers. If you don't want any spoilers or this movie to be spoiled, I'll just put the timestamp in the description or on screen, whichever one, maybe both. But you've been warned, so there you go. The story obviously follows right after John Wick 2. You see that he's still trying to get as much of the benefit of the services that the Continental offer until that 1 hour is up. During this, you see the character, the Junctionator. Oh my god, the name was so weird and like it didn't really last with me. But the actress who had that short black hair with the earring, she was going around and was trying to keep these organizations in line with the High Table. They would say, look, either hail John Wick, kill him, or we're going to replace you with someone else because you're not playing ball with us. So I like that the movie starts to have this pressure added to it, where now it's not just, okay, they're trying to kill John Wick. Now you see that the High Table slowly trying to keep these organizations in line because they start to suspect that these people are kind of being a little lenient and they may not be playing by the rules that they established. So I like that what it adds. It adds a sense of tension where it's like, oh my god, what's going to happen next? And it really adds to the plight that John Wick is going through. You really start to see the scale of the reach that the high table has, especially with the Continental. You start to understand, well, how far can you really go, because things are slowly starting to close in on him, and because you'd always expect that there'd be either exceptions or people would be looking the other way with him, but for the most part in John Wick 3, you really start to see that he puts all these people at risk of getting in trouble with the high table. You start seeing the place that raised him or trained him that he visits, that they too are also being threatened by the high table after he met them, because they helped him out, and they're like, well, now you have to come in line. You either going to be service to us, or we're just going to replace you. And you really do see the theme of cause and effect. John Wick has always had this theme of cause and effect and consequence, and it ramps up. John Wick 1 starts with a very simple premise of these thugs went to kill John Wick's dog and they took his car. That led for the consequence of John Wick killing all of them. And then in 2, you started seeing a little bit more of that, where it's now John Wick is called upon to fulfill his side of the bargain. He fulfills it, but now he starts another chain of events that has all these kind of consequences following it that leads into the third movie, where you really start to see the consequence of these actions that was done in the second movie. It doesn't rely heavily on you watching the second movie as much. It does a good job catching you up to what's going on, but it would be obviously recommended to see the second movie, mostly to understand what's going on in this movie. Halle Berry is in this movie, and at this part, I was talking to my friend about it, and he was nervous that this was going to downplay John Wick's character, and that's always a fear with a lot of these movies that have this badass character and they add sidekicks to them. It always runs the risk of watering down the main character. In this movie, that doesn't really happen. They do a good job balancing the limelight between Halle Berry and John Wick. They don't make John Wick less of a badass with her presence. They actually do a good job balancing the attention, where it's not overshadowing one person's performance. I do like that it kind of harps back to the first movie a little bit. They make some small references, like the guy they met, I can't remember the name, shot her dog, and he's like, well, he shot my dog, and he's like, I get it, I know. So it was nice to see that he still has that fondness for that puppy, and it's still a sense of subject for him, which is nice, because I always fear that that's something that's gonna be either not really present in future John Wick movies. Like, that wouldn't be a thing anymore. Like, oh, he has this new dog and this and that, but it's still a sensitive subject to him, which I like. I like that this character still has a semblance of what he was, or what he wanted to be. So I enjoyed the story of what John Wick 3 was trying to portray, and it had a good tension to it. It had a good rhythm with what it was doing. Though, as I kind of did say, that Halle Berry's performance was good and that portion of the movie was fun to watch, that was part of the movie that was dragging. I felt that trying to convince her to work with John Wick was a little dull. Like, it just felt like it was a redundant scene, and it led to more questions, because at this point in the movie, the Continental was going to turn down services for him. So I don't quite understand why the services he was still using the services there. Now, of course, you could say that, well, she's doing it at the risk of getting the high table angry at her, which probably did happen. We just haven't seen that happen yet, or if the high table found out or not. So I guess that could happen, but I don't know how I feel about that scene. It just felt a little bit longer than it should have. And I don't really quite feel any relationship between those two in terms of past experiences. In the second movie, when they introduced D'Antonio, they gave a good backstory. Like, oh yeah, all the people that he killed for Vigo in the first movie was done with John Wick and that guy. They both did a solid for each other. He did a solid for John Wick for that to happen. So that kind of gave you backstory to that, and you have something to compare it with. The whole thing with Halle Berry and John Wick just seems kind of there. It doesn't. You don't really see the how they really like what they really mean for each other. It's not terrible. It's not something that's like huge, but it's something that I just kind of wish had a similar presentation as D'Antonio in the second movie, where you feel the gravity or the seriousness of what he was, why he came to see John Wick in that movie. Here, it's just kind of, well, they worked together in the past, and that was it. And maybe I need to see the movie again because maybe there was something I missed in the conversation, because in the theater I went to, there was a lot of people that were somewhat talking during the movie, so it was a little bit hard to hear some of the dialogue because of that. But I don't think they really explained their history other than they used to work together. It's not terrible. It's not like a huge thing, but it bothered me a little bit. The ending I think was interesting, but at the same time, I think it's a little debatable with Winston's character. Did he set John Wick up? Did he really give him the fall, or was it just like, look, this is part of the plan. You're gonna have to take the fall, and we'll replan this attack against the High Table. I feel that's a little bit more debatable on where Winston lies. He's either working with the High Table, he wanted that power to begin with, or he's using that just to still side with John Wick. The other thing that I don't quite get is how did Fishburne's character, the King of the Brewery, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I don't necessarily believe how he survived that convincingly, because the Adjunctionator or whatever was there. The guy sliced him up. If she walked off, I could understand him being dead, but I don't know. I feel like that him surviving was very, very fortunate for the plot. For the most part, I think John Wick 3 could have had a good, solid ending. The first movie had a solid ending in the sense that it ended, very definitively. 2 was a little more open, but you could still have that be the last movie. And here, it's like, it doesn't feel completely cheap or manipulative to get you to watch the fourth movie, but it still feels like it might slowly become that. And I'm excited for the fourth movie, but I'm very nervous to see that, are they going to keep doing more John Wick movies? I kind of feel that this movie series would have worked better as a trilogy. I don't really see it will work as, more than that. Now, I could be wrong. The fourth movie could prove that it deserves to be made, which I'm sure it is. I'm sure the story is going to be fine, but I just don't want 10 John Wick movies. This isn't something that I want to see watered down or become something that it wasn't, because really, how far can you take John Wick? So, what would I rate this movie, you might ask? I would probably give it an 8 out of 10. It's a very solid movie. It's fun. It's engaging, but the pacing in the middle part of the movie I felt was slow. It could have picked up the pace a little bit there. It still feels not on par with the pacing of the first movie. The ending was good, but I also feel like it's starting to show signs of or worrisome fears of milking. I don't want John Wick to be a milked franchise. I hope that's not the case, but I guess we'll have to see in time. But that's not a huge downfall of the movie, but it's just something that's just on the back of my mind. But it's a solid movie nevertheless. It's fun from start to finish. I just think the middle part is kind of dragged a little too much. The performances were good for the most part. I think the only one that was not a great performance was Halle Berry. She did good. It was serviceable, but I just don't think it was as good as the other stars of the movie. So other than that, that's my review. The music, as always, before I sign off, was really good. I think the music kind of harped back to the first movie, where it has that nice guitar beat that picks up and moves on. So it has a good rhythm with the music and the action and all that. So all that was fine. Just wish the pacing was a little bit tighter than what it was. So that's it for my John Wick 3 review. Thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts that you want to share with this review, feel free to post in the comment section below. Other than that, I will see you next time.